George, you don't care about me.
Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Committee. It's Thursday the 26th of June. Last time I looked it was still 2025. I'm Caleb Tomlinson. I'm the councillor for Bamber Bridge West and I am the chair of this committee. Members and members of the public are reminded that this meeting is being streamed live to YouTube. If you're attending the meeting because you're a member of the public who has registered to speak, please note you have a time limit for 4 minutes. You'll be timed and I will confirm when your 4 minutes runs out. You should then finish, or if in the middle of making a point, wind up within a few seconds. Voting will be undertaken by the electronic system, and once the outcome of the vote is complete, Liz, our legal officer, will give us the result. Begin with some housekeeping. If you've got mobile phones with you, please either put them onto silent or switch them off. We're not anticipating a fire drill this evening, so if the fire alarm does go off, we need to exit the building. The fire exit is behind you there, and we all meet on the car park. Okay, if I can now ask everyone to introduce themselves, starting to my left and go around. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Walsh. I'm the Legal Services Manager.
Ruth Remington, Democratic Services.
I'm Peter Cabot, Councillor for Lostock Hall.
Councillor Chris Lomax, Whatley-Dale East.
Good evening, Councillor Phil Smith, and I represent New Lumpton and Hutton East.
Good evening, Councillor Ange Turner. I represent Penworth and Broadoak Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Peter Pillinger, representing Buckshaw and Worden Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Peter Molyneux, Samlesbury and Walton Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Hayden Williams, representing Leyland Central.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Mary Green, Councillor for Moss Side and Midge Hall.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Elaine Stringfellow for Lostock Hall Ward.
Good evening, I'm Fiona Hope, Planning Officer.
Good evening, Lisa Mathewson, Senior Planning Officer.
Good evening, Catherine Thomas, Planning Manager.
Good evening, Elizabeth Thornber, Head of Planning and Enforcement.
Okay, thanks for that, everyone. Agenda item 2, we don't have any apologies of absence, so we'll move on to item 3. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest in any of the applications this evening? No, good. All right, move on to item 4. I have read and agree with the minutes of our meeting on the 29th of May, and I am happy to propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stringfellow?
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay, can we go to the electronic vote on the minutes, please?
And those minutes have been approved. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and those minutes have been approved.
All right, thanks, Liz. Moving on to agenda item 5, appeal decisions. Catherine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've one appeal decision to report at this meeting. It's an unusual appeal in relation to land at 2 Moor Lane in Hutton. The appeal is made under Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning Tree Preservation England regulations, and it was against refusal of the council to grant consent for removal of a tree covered by a TPO. And the original application requested the removal of 3 beech trees. The council tree officer conducted a site visit, assessed the trees and agreed to the removal of 2 of the trees, but felt that one was a mature specimen in a prominent location which was worthy of retention. The applicant appealed against the council's decision, and I'm pleased to say that the inspector also found that the tree was worthy of retention and contributed positively to the character of the area. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks, Catherine. One happy councillor over there. All right, let's move on to item number 6, please. That's land to the south of Hall Lane at Lumpton. Fiona, if you would like to present this item.
Yes, thank you. Get the slides moving. Right. So this application relates to a 0.33 hectare piece of disused railway land and is designated under policy G1 of the Greenbelt. The proposal is for two-storey self-built detached houses with integral garages to the south of Hall Lane, approximately 168 metres from the junction with Liverpool Road, Longton. The red edge shows the location of the proposed dwellings and their domestic curtilage, with the blue edge surrounding the entire site for the additional landscaping scheme for biodiversity mitigation and enhancement. In 2024, full planning permission was granted for one house with detached garage, and the site was cleared in relation to that permission. The land was then sold to the current applicant and owner. The site plan shows the position of the houses within the site, with access demonstrating adequate visibility displays, sufficient off-road parking for at least 3 vehicles with the ability to leave the site in forward gear. Each property has got sufficient private amenity space with side and rear gardens and storage areas for waste bins. The proposal also includes a vehicle passing point on Hall Lane, which is outside of the curtilage for each house to be used for the benefit of all highway users, and highways have got no objections. The front elevation for each house would face onto Hall Lane, and the height of each house has been reduced and incorporated dormer features to be more in keeping with the area. To the right-hand side of the image, you can see 11 Hall Lane, and then just underneath there on the slide is the materials of grey slate roof tiles and natural cut coarse stone finish to be in keeping with the area, and is similar to the new dwelling house across the road and with the railway abutments which are adjacent to the site. So the site is within the wider special protection zone and of the Ramsar site of the Ribble and Alt estuaries for protection of wild birds, with several species of waterfowl, notably pink-footed geese or goose, utilising feeding areas and agricultural land outside of the special protection zone boundary. So Greater Manchester Ecology have reviewed the ecology report, and Natural England were notified of the application because of where it is. Natural England advised that a habitats regulation assessment would be required, but GMEU Ecology have advised that following a stage 1 screening assessment, no further assessment is required, and Ecology are satisfied that the proposed landscaping, to include planting of native trees, shrubland and meadowland and hedgerows, bird and bat boxes, will mitigate and enhance the biodiversity of the site and is policy compliant, and Ecology have no objections. So these are some photos taken within the site in all directions to the north, south, west and east. The proposal meets all policy requirements for spatial separation distances, and the houses will not have an overbearing impact or have a detrimental impact on the area. The building to the south, which you can see in the bottom left picture, is a large outbuilding for the property known as Beech Lodge, and the roof of the dwelling house of Beech Lodge can just see in the distance behind that outbuilding. And then the house at 11 Hall Lane to the west, you can just see the white house to the left on the left-hand side picture. That's got a blank side elevation. And on the opposite side of the road are the glass houses for Hall Lane Nursery and the newly built dwelling house on the corner of Meadowhead Lane. And you can also see the site there in its current state. That photo was taken earlier this week, so that's as it is now. So these show the approach to the site on Hall Lane, which, in parts is a narrow country lane. The top 3 photos are coming from Liverpool Road, down Hall Lane and passing the disused railway abutments, with the site coming up then on the left. You can just see the Harris fencing. And then the bottom photos are of Hall Lane looking from the opposite direction, with the site on the right-hand side. Okay, just leave you on that slide there. The proposed site is within the Greenbelt, but the development would not be considered as inappropriate development in the Greenbelt as per the NPPF exception at paragraph 154E of limited infilling in a village. Now, there are 3 tests for this exception. Firstly, unlimited, 2 dwellings have been accepted as being a limited amount. Secondly, on infilling, there is built development or domestic properties on all sides of the site and an existing ribbon form of development fronting Hall Lane at this end. Thirdly, the village element of the test does not necessarily mean a built-up area of a village as per the boundaries on our local plan map, but rather as the location appears on the ground in the immediate surrounding area. This part of Hall Lane is a built-up settlement area or a village. And also of relevance is that planning permission has been granted to the new house opposite, a lapsed permission for a house to the rear of the site, and a housing site further down to the west on Hall Lane for development under the NPPF exception of limited infilling in the village in this area. There are no other statutory objections, and there have been 16 representations received, 12 in objection and 4 in support, as outlined in the report in section 7. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, with the conditions detailed in section 13 of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your detailed report, Fiona. We do have a registered speaker in objection to this application, Susan Fox. Okay, good evening, Susan. I think you do actually know what to do. So
yes,
if you introduce yourself to the committee, and then you do have 4 minutes, and I will tell you when the 4 minutes is up. Okay.
My name is Susan Fox. I live in Longton. Thank you. So I'm obviously speaking against this proposal. The site of the proposed development is within the green belt, and also my understanding is that there is no such thing as infill, if you like, on the site, which never existed before. It was originally a railway embankment set at a height, obviously, so that the dwelling with associated buildings adjacent to it on the left, when walking up Hall Lane, could not be seen consequently. Now, following the unauthorised and unlawful excavation of the land in September 2024, it is visible like a house on the edge of a cliff. In 2016, the planning application was refused plan permission by the Planning Inspectorate following an appeal because of its greenbelt status, and also because the embankment was rich in biodiversity at that time, with historically valuable foraging ground and habitat for bats, great-crested newts and other amphibians, hedgehogs, all variety of birds, including raptors, also insects, namely butterflies and moths of note. I obtained this information from LCC archives. Also trees of 150 years old. Without any ecological survey being undertaken, and contrary to the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 as amended, part of the land was cleared without authorisation in May 2023. Now, following this, a planning officer stated in relation to another application, quote, "Beyond this is a vacant plot of land which is part of the former railway embankment, which has recently been unlawfully cleared, with the ground being excavated and removed from the site. On the second occasion in September 2024, even more land was exposed to clay level. I regard these excavations as acts of ecological vandalism, and it is a tragedy that an area once teeming with life and a superb ecosystem has disappeared. Given the devastating," so this is comments on the ecological report, in the comment. "Given the devastating ecological damage sustained, it is simply wrong that no biodiversity net gain mitigating proposal has been suggested, and for the same reason that so-called self-build dwellings are exempt from SIL. 27, proximity to the Douglas Ribble Special Protection Area. I believe that the statutory advice by Natural England that says the development site is within a zone of influence for recreational disturbance to the Special Protection Area, that a habitats regulations assessment is required. Therefore, surveys according to Conservation, Habitat and Species Act must be carried out. This cannot be dismissed by GMEU, nor would it even be legal to do so, given that it's a statutory obligation. On 33, the site is not dense shrub, but it was fertile land with a thriving ecosystem. 1034, 20 trees recommended, which are wholly inadequate in view of the ecological damage sustained. Overall, in my opinion, there will be no net gain for nature, according to the NPPF, nor adequate biodiversity net gain according to the Environment Act. Also, the council has an obligation under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act to ensure that there are appropriate mitigating measures in place to bring back the wildlife that's been lost. In my opinion, those responsible for the ecological devastation of the former railway embankment must be held accountable and compelled to rebuild the embankment with a view to bring back that which has been lost. So I'm asking the committee to refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Thank you. Fiona, would you like to address any of those issues? Yes, thank you.
Yes, Chair. So the infill with regards to the NPPF, it is an infill site in respect of there's built development on all sides. I do understand what by infill, if it was a greenfield and then there was a plot next to it they wanted to build, then there would be still a greenfield, which would not mean it's infill, but there is on both sides domestic adjacent properties, so that's why it's an infill, and the two dwellings will be limited in number. The excavation of the land for this application was done prior to the new owner, and this application as part of the 2024 full planning permission, and Ecology had reviewed that scheme and given the permission for that. I think there was an investigation as well for some earlier clearance and the embankment being taken further back, which is why there's a retaining wall going in. And that was investigated by a planning enforcement team and by the police, I think, to look at any criminal aspects with regards to the wildlife. And no further action was known to be taken. There was nothing to be done with it. And moving forwards, I think from where we are now with that site, the enhancement to the ecology with the native trees, the shrubland, the meadowland is a betterment to where we are now. But it was investigated several years ago, as part of a separate thing with enforcement. Nothing further was done with that. And the police said there was no case to take forward. So there is biodiversity net gain. It's not the new mandatory 10% where they have to submit a matrix and a BNG game plan. That's not required with self-build, custom build, which these are. But there is going to be a biodiversity net gain as per our policy. So it's policy compliant in that regards. For Natural England, GME Ecology, and as part of the ecology report submitted, they have to do a habitat stage 1 screening assessment to have a look if anything further was required. And GME Ecology deemed it doesn't need to go any further on the habitat regulations assessment, which the council would normally undertake because of the size of the site. It's not a suitable site for the protected species that use the Ramsar area, and it's surrounded by a built development road network. So in that said, they didn't need to continue with any further studies, but to notify Natural England. So Natural England, however, took it as a consultation rather than notification, because they wouldn't normally consult at this stage. They'd normally come in at a later stage of a habitat regulations assessment. So I think there was just a bit of a mix up with that. So that's why I went back to GME Ecology to double check everything. And Ecology said, no, we don't need to progress any further with the screening and the habitat regulations assessment. We're satisfied with everything as it is at this stage. So they had no objection to it in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Fiona. Thanks for that. We have the ward councillor, Councillor King, to speak on this application. Good evening, councillor. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'm Councillor Will King, represent Longton and Hutton West. Just in response to Fiona there, I've sent all councillors on this committee a picture of the site just 2 years ago and a picture of it today. I'll let you come to your own conclusions on whether you think this is a biodiversity net gain or not. But I've decided to speak up about this application tonight after going back and forth with residents about this site since the 8th of July 2023. I'd like to take you all back to 2016. Back then, this area was a patch of land sat in an idyllic and tranquil part of the village. The access to the site was the same as it is today, a narrow lane, single track in places around the back of the bakery. Much of the road has no pavement, so children will go to school using the road to walk down, much the same as they do today. In 2016, a developer applied for planning permission on the proposed site. Although access and pavements were subpar, the application was ultimately rejected, largely due to the site sitting within the green belt and the ecological importance of the site, including providing habitats for great crested newts. Today, you're being asked to consider this site because the council's ecological advisors have concluded that development can be satisfactorily screened out at stage 1 of the habitats regulation process. As councillors, you may be wondering how a site previously described as ecologically important, although not ecologically protected, can now be screened out at the first stage of the habitats regulation process. That is because we're missing a crucial piece of information relating to this site. I would like all councillors to read your emails and review the pictures that I've recently sent over to you. In early 2023, this site stood pristine with previously refused planning permission. It was unattractive to any developer. However, in September 2023, diggers were sent to excavate the land, turning much of the site into a mound of earth. The previous wildlife was ultimately gone. I sent the planning department a video at the time showing a large amount of surface runoff on Hall Lane, which is also in the images. However, I was told there isn't much we could do, and ultimately the pictures show the result. In September 2024, I emailed the planning department again after diggers and trucks were taken to the site to flatten the land. No applicant or individual at the time had any permission from the planning department or any of you councillors on this committee to do such a thing. Any remaining wildlife is now gone. I would ask all councillors to consider this context when making their decision. Although I'm not suggesting that it's the applicant that is responsible for the excavation of the site, I would ask you all that if we allow a site to be destroyed without prior permission of yourselves or the planning department, then an application is made to build on that land. What sort of precedent are you all setting? In paragraph 187A of the NPPF, it states that planning policies and decisions should contribute and enhance the natural local environment by protecting and enhancing valued landscapes, sites of biodiversity or geological value, and soils. 187B states that we must recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. 187D states we must minimise the impacts and provide net gains to biodiversity. 192B states that plans should promote conservation, restoration and enhancements of habitats. Paragraph 193A of the NPPF states that planning permission should be refused if significant harm to biodiversity cannot be avoided, mitigated or compensated. And 193C provides strong protection for irreplaceable habitats without development on these sites to be refused unless there's wholly exceptional reasons. And finally, the legal obligations under the 2021 Environment Act introduces biodiversity net gain with any new development requiring a minimum of 10% gain in biodiversity. If you can tell me from those pictures this is a gain of 10%, I would be very, very surprised. I feel the changes to this site over the last 2 years do not come close to any of these policies I've highlighted.
4 minutes, councillor.
Okay.
Tie up, please.
No worries. Alongside the site being greenbelt and not being considered as part of the recent local plan discussions, I cannot see the justification for the application to be refused. I'd like to finish off by asking councillors a simple question. What sort of message do you want to send? Do you want to take a blind eye to the previous ecological destruction, or do we want to set a precedent of saying that we should actually consider this as part of decisions and stand up for residents when this occurs?
Thanks, Councillor King. I must instruct committee members, you must disregard the email that Councillor King sent you. Okay? You do not take it into consideration. Would you? No? Do you have something to say, Councillor Smith?
I'm not sure which email is referring to, Chair, but I'm not looking at any emails that Councillor King has sent. I'm not quite sure where they are. Maybe if I were to refer to a week ago, I could have probably had a look at them, but not now.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Councillor Smith. Right, we now have the applicant with us this evening, Oren Bradshaw. If you'd like to come forward, once again, as with everyone else, you have 4 minutes just to make it fair for everyone. Hiya. Evening. Collapsed then, didn't I?
I did.
Good evening, Aaron. Okay, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. My name is Aaron Bradshaw and I'm the applicant for this planning application. I'd like to start by thanking South Ribble Council and Fiona for the work we've been doing over the past few months and for recommending it for approval. I think we've been working quite well together to put together two beautiful houses. The two homes are self-builds. The first will be for me and my partner, and the second will be for my mum and dad. I'm an engineer by trade, and I'll be leading the build on both. I'm a local lad. I'm born and bred in Preston, and I live not too far away from here currently. And I want to stay in the local area, specifically moving to Longton. My partner and I have lots of friends in the area, Shaftesbury Avenue, Chapel Lane, just down the road from the site. It's close to amenities we use, such as JD Gym, Preston Golf Club, and so on, and it's close to our region of work. I'm wanting to build a house, my partner and I, such as this, as we're looking to start a family, which is quite an exciting time. I've specifically looked at Hall Lane, as I had a friend down there previously. And it's a great location, it has the rural feel, it's near Brickcroft, and it's a local walk into the town for a good pint. Currently, I think you can see from pictures, the plot is a bit of an eyesore. It's unused, it's wasteland, it has no purpose, and it has no agricultural value. I aspire to transform this into something that you walk past and go, wow, that's nice. I want to add to the lane, I don't want to take away. I also want to be accommodating and fit in with the local area. To do this, at great expense to myself, I've included a larger than necessary passing place for the road. I've also offered in writing to the council that some of the objections said that people would like repairs to the road if they would like to house any amenities, facilities, transport, equipment on the site. If they were to do any repairs, then that would be free of charge. I've also changed the design of the house as requested by planning, including the layout, the ridge height. I've also read through all the objections thoroughly and I've discussed them with Fiona herself. I'd also like to build two houses that I'd be proud of. As an engineer, environmental effects are coming to light. So to do this, we're replanting various hardwood local species, such as silver birch and rowan. We're utilising a series of integrated solar panels, home batteries, air source heat pumps, greater than normal thicker insulation, and very energy efficient appliances. We'll also be utilising local tradesmen and, where possible, local businesses to buy materials. I hope this gives you the thought that I've spent a long time designing these houses, and there's been a lot of effort put into them. I hope from these details provided that you realise that I'm not a housing developer looking to spend as little as possible to maximise profits while not taking into account the effects on those around them, because that is just not the case. Finally, thanks again for the full support from the planning department, and we are within national and local planning policy, so I'd like to urge the committee members to support and approve this application. If not, since I feel so strongly about the planning should be granted, then we will appeal the decision. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks very much, Aaron. Just before I open up to committee, Fiona, do you want to add anything else to?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah.
Fire off.
Thank you. So just in response to a few of the comments about it is obvious Hall Lane is a narrow road. There's various areas without a footpath, but highways, again, have no objection, and they in fact feel the addition of the vehicle passing place will just make that area a little bit of an improvement. The site was cleared, and the council didn't turn a blind eye. It was fully investigated, and it was then under a previous owner, and Ecology were consulted, and Ecology was the opinion that the site did have some growth on it, but there weren't necessarily any protected species on there. There's no protected trees or hedgerows on there, and so on. So none of us like to see sites cleared, but I feel from where it is now, and the applicant is the new owner, that's the biodiversity gain from as it's now. And as it's been a self-build, custom build, they don't need to do the 10% BNG. It probably would be 10% anyway if you look at what they're doing on the landscaping. So that, and the earlier ones that were refused, the first one that was refused and appealed, dismissed, that was for 7 dwellings on that site. So that was seen as far too many in that area and too impactful. So that's why. Then there was a pit that was refused in 2023, but we've learned a lot about these limited infilling in villages since then, and PIP appeals, and what is acceptable as the NPPF inception and what isn't. And this site we do feel would be accepted as an limited infill in village. And then the 2024 permission did grant permission for a dwelling on this site as well, so that it already has a principle accepted for development on here. So really all we're considering for this application is one extra dwelling. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Fiona. Let's open up to committee, please. Anyone? Councillor Turn.
Thank you, Chair. First thing I'd like to say is that I'll never ever, as a member of this committee, take a decision about a planning application and take into consideration the fact that the applicant will take it to appeal. It's not acceptable. Certainly I, as a member of this committee, will always take a judgment on the material presentations that are made to me, and not a threat from an applicant that they're going to go to appeal if we reject it. It's not acceptable. My question is, the land, for Fiona really, the land that we're talking about, how long has that been left? I'll use the word derelict, but I know that people recognised that as previously an ecological site. But how long's it been left in this state? Are we talking decades? Are we talking a year? I just don't know. Thank you.
So I wouldn't know when it was last railway land. Probably, I think it was in the 90s but that piece of land from the railway, I think, was sold in 94, I think. So up until then it was theirs. And there's a possibility it's contaminated land, which is why one of the conditions, they have to do land surveys to check for any contamination because of its previous use. The growth then occurred naturally over time. So that's why we don't accept it as previously developed land, because with that growth and the fact that it had not been used for such a long time, we do see it as returned back to the green belt and not previously developed. The site clearance was in 2024 as part of the application that got full planning permission. Now, I think there was possibly some prior to that was also investigated, and I think it was investigated after that permission as well. So there has been some site clearance, that there's no doubts on that, but I think ecology was satisfied that there was no protected species on there. It didn't have a high ecological value in terms of the Ramsar site. So in that regards, that's why the clearance has continued. And now as this application, it was like this when the new owner got the site. So from this date. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. You've answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've been reading through this. I'd like to thank Fiona for explaining this really, really well. And a lot of the questions I perhaps would have answered have been answered by Fiona. It's been really well explained. And also, Councillor King made some really compelling arguments. He explained very well part of what the issues are with it. Now, there are a couple of issues that I see that I don't think are connected with it. This patch of land is effectively been ecologically vandalised over the last couple of years. Now, that isn't, from the sound of things, isn't the current owner's fault. It's whoever's held it in the past. But so for want of a better expression, if nothing was to happen to this land, and the landowner could have just cleared it anyway and just done whatever they wanted with it, because it wasn't a protected piece of land, it isn't ecologically protected or anything like that. They can just clear it and do what they want with it, which I think is wrong. But that's not really connected to this particular planning application. This planning application is to put something on a patch of land that is now effectively derelict. The fact that it's been cleared isn't the applicant's fault, and I don't think it's connected with the actual planning application itself. The planning application already has one particular house agreed for it. It's been cleared for that. All we're doing is adding another house. So whilst I fundamentally disagree with the economic vandalism that's put there. It is limited infill. It is tidying up a patch of derelict land that's been left derelict. So there is betterment there. Again, there's a vehicle passing point which would on balance make the lane safer. So we are ending up trying to repair a position from better than where we are now that's fully policy compliant for a number of different reasons. So I'm quite happy with going along with the officer's recommendation and proposing approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I have Councillor Mrs Green and then Councillor Pillinger.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Williams has just said, this patch of land, protected or not, has been completely decimated from what we've heard from the ward councillor. It wouldn't have been a derelict piece of land if that land hadn't have been churned up and messed around with. It would have been a green area with a certain amount of wildlife from what we've heard. It's not now. It's just all churned up and barren piece of land. And just making it like that isn't a good excuse to say, well, it's better having a house on it now or two houses on it now to make it look better. It shouldn't have been put like that in the first place, especially without permission. From what I can gather in the report, the 2-storey, 5-bedroom properties, they don't appear to be in keeping with other properties around that area, so they're out of keeping. And once again, although I can't reference another application, it's nothing to do with this, but it seems to be that we're going down a trend, which I'm a bit concerned about, of wherever someone wants to build houses, if they're situated in an area where the access is very narrow, or we'll stick 1 or 2 passing places in to make it better for traffic. Are we creating, as Councillor King said, are we creating a precedence in that line, which we've got to be very careful of? It's obviously obviously a very narrow lane, and although it's only 2 houses, it could potentially be 5 or 6 cars coming in and out of those houses. It's decimated the whole lane once again. It's another country area that's been decimated. And the countryside is rapidly disappearing and there's no pavements or anything. So it's not going to be conducive with traffic coming down because there's no pavements for people to walk on. I feel on the habitat and the ecological facts that this application shouldn't happen. And I too agree with Councillor Turner. We consider all applications on this committee. And whether we agree or don't agree about it, it's not relevant and not appropriate for the applicant to start putting threats in about putting in appeal. If they want to put appeal in, that's their choice. But it shouldn't be sort of a blackmail for us to pass or not pass on this committee. We look at applications for their own merit and on the information that we've received. So I would like to propose refusal.
Right, well, I will take that proposal, but Catherine, can you just... No. Catherine, can you just explain to Councillor Green what I consider it's already got approval on the site?
Yeah, so Councillor Green, we have obviously got to take into account the most recent planning history on this site. And there is an extant planning permission for 1 dwelling there already. So we're only talking about the increase in 1 dwelling. And that site is sufficient, as I mentioned, to comfortably accommodate an additional dwelling. The fact that the site has been cleared, well, there is already planning permission that allowed for the clearance of that site. There were ecology reports submitted at the time of that application that were considered fully by officers at that point. Permission was granted, the site's been cleared, and therefore the development of that site can continue regardless, because there is an extant permission. So what we're actually talking about is one additional dwelling, and it's our view, and I've visited the site as well as Fiona, that that site will comfortably accommodate this additional dwelling, that the benefits of the development in terms of the additional land that's going to be outside of the domestic curtilage but will be improved with biodiversity enhancement, planting, tree planting, will actually be of significant benefit to the character and appearance of Hall Lane. And I understand the point that you've made regarding the passing place and whether that will set a precedent. But in that particular location, I think the passing place will be of benefit. Clearly, it is a narrow lane, and I think there would be some improvements to other residents using the lane. In terms of vehicular movements associated with the development, we're talking about those associated with a single house. And I don't feel that there will be any justification to refuse the application based on additional vehicular movements. And I disagree that the impact on the character of the area would be so significant as to warrant a refusal. Yes, the houses are of a different design to other properties, but there's already modern infill directly opposite to this particular plot. So I think on balance, as I said, I did give it some thought, this particular application. I've been to visit myself, and I do consider it as something that officers are correct in recommending an approval.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Councillor Pillinger.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to everybody, both those who've spoken for and against. It's good to have a young person who wants to build their own house. I think I would want to encourage that sort of development. We do need to remember that villages like Longton do need an influx of younger people bringing families in. If the schools of the area are going to continue to have children in them, and every village needs 1 or 2 new houses in an area that keeps the whole village alive. So this sort of development, I think actually I would prefer to see a lot of peripheral estates of 20 houses around the edge of a village. This seems much more in keeping with what the village needs than something, as I say, a larger development off on the edge of the village. So I think overall, having listened to everything, I can see why we ought to approve it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Pillinger. Right, so do I have a seconder for refusal? Pardon? I've had right.
Sorry, you need to do approval first because Councillor Williams. We did a seconder.
You just seconded it.
He didn't say the words.
Can you say?
I apologize. I will second.
Thank you. Pernickety. Right. Do I have a seconder for refusal, please? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak on this first, Chair. Certainly with regard to the green belt and the infilling villages, 154E of the NPPF. I would certainly like to challenge that. I think you could ask anybody that lives in Longton whether they think Hall Lane is within the village or in the environment of Longton, and they would say it isn't. It is somewhere in the countryside between Longton and Much Hoole or Little Hoole, or in fact both of them. So it's not infill in the village, and I would take exception to have a different opinion rather than on that. The environmental impact on this, it's just, I would like to have seen this council, if it was in our remit, to find out who's actually dug that hole there, who's done all that work, and actually do something about it. I mean, it's just dreadful. It is absolutely dreadful to see this sort of thing going on down the lanes. And, you know, I've spoken about lanes before, but they are important to our environment. So I don't think this is infill in village, and I think if we're using that as a reason for allowing the development, I think it's incorrect. I just don't think it's infill in villages. So I think it falls on the first count, if you like. I will not be supporting it, Chair, and I think I would second refusal on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Smith. Right, so does anybody else want to add to the debate or not?
Chair.
Councillor Molyneux.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a real concern over these sort of applications that, you know, we're in a greenbelt area. It's almost like we're just riding roughshod over it and accepting lots of things that maybe some time ago we wouldn't have done. But there is a real concern, and I would ask our planning officers. I understand what was explained before, but I have a real concern about applications like this coming forward and being allowed to go through. So from my point of view, I won't be agreeing with this. I'll be against it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Molyneux. Right, okay, so one word. I'll give you a quick word. It's velocity.
Okay, just to come back very quickly on that, just in relation to Councillor Smith, I understand the position that you're taking, that you don't consider that this property is within a village. However, I must draw your attention to the fact there is an extant planning permission granted by this council where it was concluded that the site is limited infill in a village. And to take a contrary view at this stage would open up the council to considerable risk at the appeal stage.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Right, I'm going to close the debate down and we're going to go to a vote. And the way it works is because we've had a proposal against the officer's recommendations from Councillor Mrs. Green, seconded by Councillor Smith. We are now going to vote on refusal. Okay, so we'll do it on the electronic vote. This is on the amendment proposed by Councillor Mrs. Green, seconded by Phil Smith, for refusal of the application against the recommendation of the officer. Okay.
So members have voted, and the proposal has been lost. So it's been refused on that basis.
Okay, so we now go to the vote on approval as per the officer's recommendation that it's policy compliant. So all in favour of approval, please. Liz.
Yeah. Members have voted in favour of officer recommendation that planning permission be granted subject to conditions.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you were here just for that one application, we have got quite a few more tonight, so thanks for your attendance. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I don't know whether you've had your amendments for this evening or not, but item 7 has been withdrawn. So we're moving on to item number 8, which is Penwortham Mills, Factory Lane, Penwortham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just talk you through this application. The case officer, unfortunately, has been called away because we've got an inspectorate site visit tonight, which is unusual in the evening, but that's where she is. So I'm just going to talk you through to the best of my ability. So the application site is the former Penrith and Mill site off Factory Lane. And the planning permission was granted for a hybrid development on this site in 2023, which included a Lidl store and residential development. The application before us tonight refers to the area of land in the Red Edge, which is the residential development referred to as Phase 1B, and a portion of Phase 1B, so 49 dwellings. The Lidl store, which you can see marked on the plan in front of you on the aerial photograph, has now been completed. Next slide, please, Lisa. So this is the overall layout for the site. You can see the Lidl store in pale blue and the residential phase that's referred to as 1B in purple. You can see that the wider site, the Lidl store access and the access to the 1B site is taken from the Causey, and that the access into the site is already fully constructed. Next slide, please, Lisa. So this application is for effectively a variation of house types. The company that was granted the original planning permission for this site is not going forward to actually build out the development. The residential area here has been taken over by Persimmon. So what they want to simply do is swap in their own house types for the house types that we were approved. So the slide to the left is the approved plan for Phase B, 1B, and we're looking at the area in the blue edge. So it's immediately to the south of the Lidl store and to the west of the Lidl store. And the plan on the right-hand side is the revised layout, which is now the subject of this application. And as you can see, there is hardly any difference at all in the two layouts. The access road is in the same location. The properties largely are in the same format as has previously been approved, with only some very slight variation. Next slide, please, Lisa. So the properties will be arranged largely. There's a sort of spine road that goes in to the back of Lidl, with properties whose rear gardens will back onto the superstore, and then a sort of cluster development to the opposite side of the access road next to Lidl. On that plan that you're looking in front of you there, those are the affordable houses that are marked. We're looking at only the ones in the Red Edge boundary. Obviously a mix in terms of affordable rent and sort of other forms of product, and pepper potted throughout the estate so that they're tenure blind. Next slide, please, Lisa. So that's the site that we're looking at. Obviously, it's gently sloping former agricultural land. You can just see the rear of the Lidl store. Next slide. And there is the Lidl store. You can see that the access roads are already into the development off the Causey. Next slide, please. And that's looking into the site that's actually opposite the Lidl, where you can see some of the hardcore's already gone down to facilitate the access to be continued further into the site. So in terms of changes from the original permission, they're extremely limited. The scheme is obviously policy compliant. We've checked the separation distances between the plots. There was original legal agreement with the application which secured section 106 it was for the affordable housing and for the public open space. So there will be a deed of variation to that original agreement. So the recommendation is for granting, subject to a new deed of variation. Thank you, Chair.
A great report, Catherine. Well done.
Thank you, man. I've got my notes.
You said Lidl so many times. I think you may shop there. Right. Do we have Rachel Graham with us this evening? Evening, Rachel. I try and be light, you know what I mean? Okay, you have 4 minutes, okay?
Thank you and good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Rachel Graham. I work for Persimmon Homes, the applicant of the item before you. The site has a very long planning history, with the first application for homes on the site over 15 years ago. Persimmon Homes have only bought the site earlier this year in April, and notwithstanding the little store at the front end, who have installed, as mentioned, the access road already, Persimmon are very keen to realise development and the delivery of family homes on this site, essentially a brownfield allocation in the heart of South Ribble. As you've already heard, the application is a variation of an existing extant hybrid permission. Our application only looks to update the first 49 homes on the site for the time being, partially known as Site B, to reflect the already approved arrangement as closely as possible. Ordinarily, an application like this wouldn't necessarily be presented before you, but because of the scale of the wider site, that's why we're here. The application doesn't propose to amend the roads or any of the infrastructure within that first parcel. It only seeks to replace the previously approved homes with homes that Persimmon can legally build, and therefore commence the delivery of what's been a stalled housing site now. It is Persimmon's intention, if we're successful, to follow this application with an update to the remainder of Phase 1B alongside a reserve matters for Phases 2 and 3, so that the whole site can then be considered together. We're excited about the prospect of bringing this site back to life, and I'm happy to answer any questions if that's appropriate, but keep it short. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Right, let's open up to committee. Councillor, I'm going to have to get the stopwatch on that because you Councillor Smith, because obviously this is apolitical, this meeting. So, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was marginally quicker on the draw, I'm afraid, but with Councillor Gabbard. But yeah, it's a fairly straightforward application, Chair. So I will go for approval. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gabbard.
I'll second that for approval, Chair.
Do we have any other recommendations or proposals? Okay, can we go to the electronic vote, please, for approval?
Members have voted in favour of officer recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Lizzie. Congratulations, Persimmon. And this committee looks forward to meeting you for Phase 2, Phase 3 and completing the site. Okay? Okay, thanks for coming this evening. I hope you found it interesting. Let's move on to item number 9 now, which is asking us to, it's not a planning application, it's asking us to give our views on an LCC application, and seeing as they never help us out, I don't see any reason why we should help them out. So come on, let's pick the bones, let's pick the meat off these bones. Come on. Anyone? Councillor Smith, and then I'm going to nominate myself.
I think first of all, Chair, I think this is it. This is in.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you. Lisa worked all week on her presentation. I've completely bypassed her hard work. Lisa, over to you, and then we'll pick the meat off the bones.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I think, as Chair's already said, this is an application for discussion more so, because it's a county council application who are the determining authority as landowners for the site. I think we'll all be aware of this site as part of the Curedon Master Plan site, but you've got adopted policy C4 and the adopted local plan. So this represents part E of the master plan, which has outline permission from December 2023. So the parcel there is outlined in red there. So to the south, you've got Stony Lane, you've got the cricket club on the west area, you've got pylons going across the site, and you've got Old School Lane on the eastern boundary, where you've got some dwellings. So that's just the master plan and zone E there, which is earmarked in red. So just to highlight, there's an existing hedgerow which runs through the site, just denoting the boundary between the two individual fields. There you've got a slight indent on the western boundary where there's an existing substation present. These are some photographs taken through the site. So you can see the pylons present on the top left photograph, got the substation at the bottom left and the hedgerow boundary. You can see, and where that gate is the approximate location, which is just slightly to the left of that, of the proposed access. Whilst access wasn't part of the original outline permission, there was a lot of discussions there about that being the approximate location of the vehicular access point, and that is where it is envisaged. It's just some more photographs of Stannyfield Lane there, and you've got the cricket pitch at the top right, and there's a couple of school properties on Old School Lane which are currently under construction there as well. So this is the proposed layout. So it's a reserve matters application for 74 open market dwellings on that. The original outline and master plan does envisage that would be 116 properties and a combination of 2, 3 and 4 bed dwellings, but the application that has come in to the County Council is only a mix of 3 and 4 bed dwellings, which I think I've detailed in the report itself, and it is heavily weighted towards the 4 bed side of things as well, which is whilst there's a slightly lower number of properties there as well. So there's a mix of detached, semi-detached and short terrace properties as well there. So there's one vehicular access point off Stannyfield Lane, which the master plan did indicate would have landscape footpaths at either side and be tree lined. So that has complied with that requirement. And the proposal also does meets with the requirement of the height restriction, which is envisaged with the property. So they are all within that height restriction. So there's a proposed substation on the eastern side with a small lap in front of that, which is indicated there, and you've got a proposed SUDS area to the northwest corner. Just in terms of taking it forward, you can see in the report, it has concluded that this is the first reserve matters application as on part of the site. So it does represent an important proposal within the council's boundary and would bring significant economic benefits to residents and businesses throughout as the allocation proposed. So the principle of development on the site is considered to be acceptable. However, we do have concerns over design, the lack of affordable housing, because no affordable housing is proposed as part of the application, and other matters which are outlined in detail within section 8 of the report. So section 8.1 does say that we would put forward a holding objection to the County Council regarding the lack of affordable housing, which is required by condition 7 of the outline approval. And we do request to see sort of full information relating to that. Section 8.2, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but there's a number of considerations there which we think should be provided in writing to the County Council for them to request information on. So that's all of the detail there, Chair.
Okay, Lisa, thanks. I mean, I am going to ask each and every one of you to have some input into this. Because obviously we're just sending our comments to LCC. Being rather, how can I say, long in the tooth on planning, I've got to say this is one of the worst planning applications that's ever come before this committee. Access, bad. Affordable, 0. I don't know. I'm going to open up and let's see what you've got to say on it. Councillor Smith.
I think the first thing I was going to say, Chair, is this application is in South Ribble, at least at the moment. Could be somewhere else in a few years' time, but at the moment it's still in South Ribble, and this planning application should be determined in South Ribble. And I think we must, as a committee, express our disappointment with County Council, because we would like to pass planning applications or can take planning applications in South Ribble. I do take the point about no affordable housing. It's a disgrace, to be quite honest. It's just should not happen. So I would say it's not policy compliant to start with. If there's no affordable housing on it, it would appear that it's not policy compliant. Whilst we're all, I'm sure, like the previous site, looking forward to something happening at Kewarden, because we've been waiting for 20 years that I know of, and been very, very involved in some of it at some stage. But look forward to something happening on that site, and County Council eventually bringing something forward. Because at the moment, nothing happening on there is costing this council millions of pounds by a lost income with regard to what should be happening on that site. We can see why they want to determine it themselves, because we probably would refuse it. So I'll leave that with you, Chair. Thank you.
Well said. I have Councillor Mrs Green, then I have Councillor Williams, then I have Councillor Pillinger, and then I have Councillor Stringfellow, and then Councillor Turner. And I'm just do it in order, please. I'm not even writing it down.
Just 2 points, Chair. I'm concerned about the access onto Stanleyfield Lane. That's quite a big concern, I think, especially with the new alterations they're going to have down there and how it's going to thing. But the other thing I was going to ask is more of a question than a statement, really. It says in the report that it's going to be £206,238 coming off this development. 111,000 for playing pitches and 94,000 towards green spaces. Have we any idea where they're planning to spend that money and have these areas? It's just a question, really.
Yeah, the application is actually silent on the monetary value coming in. So the point that I've put there in the report is I'm requesting that is requested from the applicant to pay the money, so that would go to the local play area. But at the minute, the application hasn't actually proposed that contribution. So we're in our response. I'm proposing, as long as that's agreed here, that we request that money does come to us for public open space, because there's no equipped area proposed on site. It's just a lap, which is a local area of play. Yeah, that's our opinion.
We could do with play areas for children in new areas that's been developed. So, you know, I just wondered if any of that could be ring fenced for those areas, that was all.
Yeah, we can request more detail from our Parks Department to the specific areas indicated. But yeah, they have said that they could spend that money on existing play areas. But it's whether we think it should be provided on site for, you know, ones of that size. But at the minute, that hasn't been put forward as a contribution, but we are suggesting that should be required under our policy and the adopted plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. I would suggest that if they try and put play area on that field, they're going to have to reduce the number of houses, because they're crammed in 74 houses on there. Councillor Williams, then Councillor Pillinger, then Councillor Stringfellow, then Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much, Chair. God, where do I start with this? Make it quick. I'll make it quick. Right. First of all, quoting a well-esteemed ex-member of the planning committee from years past, this committee is insulted by the fact that everybody knows what the rules are and they have been there a number of years. So go away until you can come back and put 30% on this site. I remember Barry Yates saying that years ago about the test track. So, don't even insult us with that, with coming here with an application that hasn't got 30% on it. That's the first thing. I also note earlier in the week, there was a news report on Blog Preston that says the parcel of land next door, Brookhouse's land, has been bought by Places for People, and they're putting 74 fully affordable houses on that site, and an application will be coming forward to this council later this year. That's according to Blog Preston. Whether that be right or not, I don't know. But the principle is, if Places for People can put affordable housing on that site, why can't this site have 30% affordable on it? So that is rubbish. And also, like it's already been detailed, the houses are of a poor design. The spatial separation between all the houses, but also the conditions they're wanting to discharge as well. Getting rid of the reserve masses to accompanied by a landscaping and a habitat management plan. So they're not going to forward anything about habitat management or anything like that. Just wipe that one out. We've talked about habitat tonight. They're not about wiping that one out. And also an acoustic assessment. It's next to a main bypass. It's next to one of the biggest roundabouts going in the whole of the busiest roads in South Ribble, the A582. It's similar down to the Tank roundabout. That's full of acoustic fences to try and do something about it. And that was good planning on the part of the developer down on that site. No acoustic fences. Can you imagine living in one of these houses? So there is a lot to be done on this. And I would be appalled if LCC went ahead and approved it as it stands, and as Councillor Smith said, it should be come forward to this council for consideration.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of stuff that I could say has already been said, and I would simply agree with just about everything that's already been said. I was going to ask what's happened to the other half of Zone E. We now hear there's a possibility that it's going to be developed by Places for People, in which case are we ghettoising this development so that one half of it becomes affordable houses and the rest doesn't? That is against the principles of how we plan communities these days. The other thing I was going to ask was whether I was having quite a close look, or as far as I can, about homes that seem to be almost directly under high tension cables. And while it's inconclusive, I remember some years ago doing some research, and I'm a scientist by background, and there does seem to be some evidence for cancer clusters underneath high tension cables, and that doesn't seem to be taken into account. I've always been boggled by this anomaly that the county council can grant themselves planning permission on their own property, and particularly when it relates to matters like domestic dwellings. I can understand why you've got that there if you're talking about a big industrial plan or something like that is strategic for the county. But this isn't strategic for the county. It is strategic for this borough, and it ought to be this borough's responsibility to grant planning permission.
Lisa, did you want to come in before Councillor Stringfellow and Councillor Turner?
Yeah, there was just a couple of points. The County Council are mindful of the affordable housing position. Obviously, national planning policy and our adopted policy does allow for viability assessments to be provided. So they have provided a viability assessment, but because we aren't the determining authority, we've not seen the full viability. So I know that they are having discussions and they have instructed somebody to independently assess that. So they are waiting on the further response from that. So the County Council are certainly mindful of that position on viability side of things. So I think I've detailed in the report some concerns we do have on that. Just a couple of the other things in terms of the pylons. There aren't any dwellings specifically underneath the line of the pylons themselves. There is on the site plan an exclusion zone, I think of 15 metres, but I have pointed out there is one of the garden areas in the top northeast corner. The garden area does go underneath that restriction zone as well, which I've just alluded to, but there's no dwellings themselves directly underneath them itself. So it was just on those 2 points to come back on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stringfellow and then Councillor Turner. I think then we're going to tie up. Thanks.
I'd agree with everything that everybody said. I'm just a little bit concerned that they've taken out the 2-bedroomed houses from the estate. And it's just not making it possible for young couples or even single people to get on the housing ladder. It makes it very difficult for them if the first house they can buy is a 3-bedroomed house. And it seems like they're almost trying to cut them out of the housing chain. And I just think it makes it really, really difficult. And that on top of the lack of affordable housing, it's just not something that we should be encouraging at all. I think it's disgraceful. That's all I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with more or less everything that's been said. And the biggest issue, or the clearest issue for me, is the lack of affordable housing. And the biggest issue for me is the lack of affordable housing. And I'm hoping that we have one day when we get a planning application which is a similar model to something which I experienced. It was actually during the general election. I went to help someone up at the general election at Oxenholme, and they've got an estate on Oxenholme, and it is amazing. It's like a 4-storey apartment blocks that are beautifully designed, and when you get apartment blocks, that really does bring the house prices down, and it gives people a chance to get on the housing market. And I'm sorry to see that we're still on houses, whether they're semis or detaches, but there's still a house taking up square meterage when you could actually build a really nice apartment block and get more benefit out of it for people being able to live there. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to have the last say, because nobody mentioned it. Stannyfield Lane is a lane, 2-way traffic. You're going to have a new housing estate, 74 properties from LCC. On the other side of the road, you're going to have a county cricket ground. County cricket ground. And the amount of traffic that will generate during the summer, from 582 through Leyland, down Croston Road. I mean, nobody seems to have got the thinking head on. But I'm not surprised, because Highways haven't even commented yet. What do we think of that? Highways haven't commented on it yet. Councillor Lomax, I will allow it, but I've given you fair warning.
I'm really sorry. It's just the only thing that's coming into my head is the need, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to write this down, but to this whole scheme, it should be a Monty Python answer, which goes, no.
I don't know how you're going to minute that, but right, I think, right, yeah. So let's try up now then. I think you've got everything you need there, Catherine, haven't you?
Yes.
Would you like to tell us what the main points are? Because apparently we have to go to the vote on this, don't we?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have written down what everybody said. So rather than repeat it back to you, because that's going to take as long as it did for you to all say it, I think what we'll do is we've already covered an awful lot of those points in our response, our proposed response. So if there's anything that we've actually missed that has been mentioned, we can add it into the comments and then send them off. And what we've also asked for in that, because we're not entirely sure which of their committees they're hoping to take it to, we've not been having a lot of correspondence, to be fair, with the officers at County. And we didn't want them to take it to July committee without giving us, this committee, the opportunity to make comments. So what we've also asked for is a delegation, so when we do receive additional information, to be able to go back and respond quickly to any issues.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks very much, Catherine. Okay, I'll tie up then tonight. Thanks very much for attending.
You do need to vote on this one.
Oh,
Sorry. We'll get there.
right. Can we vote in favour of Catherine sending our comments to LCC? Does anybody want to vote against or right? Okay, right. Come on, we're going to the vote then.
Members have voted in favour of offers of recommendation.
Right, folks, thanks for attending this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee. We'll see you next time, Thursday, the 24th of July.